250,000 units that they're supposed to to be dishing. And that's even
Every
less.
year.
That's less than 5%.
Right.
So it goes without saying, it is not even a question of whether or not the government has failed. It is how bad has the government failed. Because if it was maybe a clear figure, let's say they promised 250,000 units and maybe so far so good they're delivering 200,000 a year. Now that is a conversation we can have as Kenyans and say, okay, they may not have hit the target, maybe they were pretty too ambitious, but at least we are somewhere. But less than 2,000 compared to the promised 250,000 units, that's a clear joke on, you know, on Kenyans, because 100 billion is not something to play around when it comes to Kenyans. And there's something, I don't know what it is about this government and the 100 billion figure. You can remember when we also go to SHA, it is pretty much the same amount, 104 or 108 billion thereabout for SHA. And now when we go to the housing project, they have so far collected 100 billion, which is nowhere to be seen, because some of these projects that they are launching are actually the ones that Uhuru Kenyatta launched. So we are yet to see a project that this Kenya Kwanza government has launched from ground up.
Right.
Yes.
And Eston, you remember earlier, some time back, the Central Organization of Trade Unions, COTU, did raise, you know, alarm, accusing the government of diverting billions from the housing levy. You remember that? You know, to markets and other unrelated projects. And the government denied any wrongdoing. And there's an issue of none of these things that are raised by institutions being looked into in terms of credibility. Is this money going into the projects that it's supposed to go to?
My biggest question when it comes to this housing arrangement, if I may call it, is if I asked you to contribute towards maybe buying a new car, and you contributed monthly towards buying that new car, how then, upon you maybe contributing for a particular maybe period, why would I still go back and ask you to pay for the same? Because why are Kenyans buying the same units they have been contributing towards? That's the biggest question. Because now the government is taking from Kenyans two ways, from the contribution and from the sale of these houses. And there was a concern a while back about the tenants who said they used to pay to the government, now they are paying to a private entity for, you know, they were calling it a maintenance fee.
Right.
I remember they were collecting about 3,000 per apartment, and they had collected a significant amount, but the houses were not in any way maintained. You know, they were dilapidated. The paint was, you know, it was not done. It is a clear disregard of the, you know, the plight of the Kenyan.
Right.
On one hand, you're taxing them beyond, you know, reach. On the other hand, you're delivering, you know, less than expected. And every time Kenyans complain, they compare us to Sudan. Look at Sudan. You're far much better than Sudan. But when it comes to collecting our taxes, they compare us to Singapore. Why? That is the big question. If you have to tax us like Singapore, at least let us enjoy the same amenities, the same development, the same infrastructure as Singapore. But don't compare us to Sudan, but when it comes to taxing, you tax us like Singapore.
Right.
We don't want that as Kenyans.
Quite a horrible situation there. Thank you so much, Eston. There's another story here on the People Daily, and of course we know that gospel singer Betty Bayo is expected to be laid to rest today in Ndumberi. But the issue that is coming out here on People Daily on the second page, it says the gaps between law and practice in crisis, and it's talking about, you know, the funeral is scheduled to happen today. And of course, you remember after her demise, there were a lot of questions in terms of how she passed away, how she was treated at the medical facility, and how she was not able to get the emergency care that she was supposed to. And constitutionally, this is a fundamental right for any Kenyans. So that begs the question, are our laws in line enough to ensure that every citizen, every Kenyan gets that emergency treatment? What does the law say about that? I mean, this issue clearly brought out a lot of issues, a lot of gaps. This is not the first incident we've had where, you know, people have gone to hospitals in quite dire critical conditions and being turned away simply because they do not have the deposit money.
First of all, my profound condolences to her family and loved ones. The issue of health is a critical issue when it comes to the Kenyan, the ordinary Kenyan.
Right.
Because we have, let me just use we, because we have been neglected by our leadership.
Right.
And when you see Kenyans complain time and again, I don't think we have a shortage of laws in Kenya, if I may say so, because when you see a country enforcing or trying to maybe formulate new policies every now and then, maybe now it is not a policy issue. It is maybe a tradition, a culture issue where we do not abide by these laws.
Right.
Because even the laws we have as at now, we have failed to abide by those laws. So what happens if we add more laws? Because it is supposed to be as simple as right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a medic, for example, when you're running a facility, when you're in government, you need to know what is right for your people, by your people, and you stick to that. But the point where we as Kenyans have to keep on demanding for policies, you know, that maybe serve the Kenyan population.
Right.
But these same politicians, when they go to parliament, they pass policies that we never asked them to. You know, they push forward, you know, bills that, you know, are not for the benefit of Kenyans. Bills that have been pushed by maybe the financing institutions, maybe the Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, but anything to do with the Kenyan, they disregard that.
It's pushed behind.
It is pushed behind. But anything they want, anything elections, anything impeachment, they are very quick to do it.
Right.
And when it comes to health, I don't think we need more reforms. What we need is enforcement. The policies we have in place, let them be enforced. But it's a typical case of monkey see, monkey do. If we see a lot of playing around at the top, it's going to trickle down to the very lowest, health worker. So I think the Ministry of Health as a whole needs to call themselves to a meeting. There has been complaints from the governors. They're saying, they're trying to micromanage, everything to do with SHA and whatnot. And they expect the counties to run, smoothly, because you cannot devolve functions and fail to devolve the finances. How are you supposed to run these facilities if we devolve the functions to you as governors, but the Ministry of Health still wants to control the finances? That is the major problem we have in Kenya. Okay. So when you want to micromanage everything from a central point, and I think as Kenyans, why we brought in this new constitution, we're trying to move from a centralized political system,
right,
the Moi system, to a decentralized system where we have many heads. Yes. But when you want to micromanage everything from the top, you will miss such things, because it is the doctor beneath, the MCA, the senator, all those people who are closest to the people that will see the gaps that you will not be able to see at the Ministry of Health. So allow these people at the lowest level to work. Don't micromanage everything from the Ministry of Health. You will not miss such, such problems that may put the health and, the lives of Kenyans at risk.
Right, yeah. Right. Thank you so much. And indeed, may her soul rest in peace. All right, there's another story on page 3. It's an interesting story, quite a sad story actually, Aston. Justice for Sale, and it's talking about the cost of being a child in northern Kenya. And it's saying that anytime a child's case is reported to a children's office after surviving violent assault, elders often arrive before the police. Why is this? They demand the matter to be closed immediately or to be resolved out of court, commonly referred to as kangaroo courts, that have affected, children cases in terms of compensation and whatnot. What do you make of all this?
First of all, I want to denote and dispel a particular saying that goes, you should never argue with culture, you should never question traditions. I think part of growth is accepting that, some of these things may be primitive and some of them may be retrogressive. And that is why, change is inevitable in every society. Because if we are to argue in terms of culture and traditions, there was a time where slavery was legal, but was it right? So if we are to argue on the basis of culture and tradition, and maybe the slave has come here and tell us, but we have been doing this for years, why would you question us? Okay. Just because you've been doing something for years does not make it right. So the issue of early marriages, the issue of, sweeping these cases of child molestation under the carpet for the, what they say, to protect the image of the community. I think we need to relook our traditions and cultures. We need to come together. I think every community has elites.
Right.
And the leaders, the community leaders, come together, see what is working for you and what is not working. Let us embrace change.
Okay. All right, before we look at the Standard, there is an interesting story here about, the campaigns that have been embarked by, various political quarters. And it says, Kindiki on trial in Mbere as Ruto ducks Gachagua. I'm sure you saw the Deputy President's camping there yesterday. DCP party leader Gachagua was also there. And, as the by-election campaign enters their final stretch, Mbere North seat has emerged as a high-stake contest, pitting the government and the opposition, of course. On the ground, it is a game of wits, as Deputy President Kithure Kindiki and his predecessor Rigathi Gachagua focus on garnering the votes. What do you make of everything that has been going on? How much is at stake here for Deputy President Kithure Kindiki?
I think the government is deliberately putting too much on the Deputy President Kithure Kindiki, because you cannot expect one man to repair the reputation that has been ruined by many people in government.
Right.
Because now you cannot place the future or the fate of Kithure Kindiki based on a by-election that he has to, to rectify or make it right with Kenyans as a result of a failed system.
Right.
So you expect one man to correct an entire system.
Do you think he's being used as the fall guy?
I think he is being used as a scapegoat, if you ask me. And this is how, as a political analyst, this is how I see it. Clearly, you have not seen the president on ground campaigning for their candidate.
Right.
He has not been there, because now he wants to leave it on Professor Kithure Kindiki, in that if they fail to deliver that seat, it will be purely on the deputy president. But I also see some calculation on the opposition. I think the DCP party also is being calculative, in that they know this is a very defining moment for them, and that is why they settled on the DP candidate. In that if they lost that election, it would not be DCP that lost, it will be DP, because they're trying to clinch the Mount Kenya populace or the Mount Kenya vote.
Right.
So I think it's calculation on both sides. Maybe the president is being cautious, but at the same time putting his deputy at risk. Also, the opposition is being calculative and saying, okay, DP is a small pawn, maybe we can sacrifice that for the queen and king, to thrive. So I just hope it is not a blatant attempt to sweep the deputy president's effort under the carpet, because I think he's one gentleman who has been trying so much to to save the image of this government, but it has proven hard not to crack, because they have already ruined their reputation.
All right.
Yeah.
One person has is quoted here saying that, if Newton Karish, the candidate for DP party, wins, Gachagua will have cemented his influence to the level of being seen as the ultimate kingpin of the Mount Kenya region after Uhuru, former president. And he will also have an easy time of marketing DCP ahead of the 2027 general elections. And if you remember yesterday, Deputy President, was castigating Rigathi for saying, why are you claiming to be the Mount Kenya kingpin? Who made you kingpin? Do you think, how much of a win is this going to be for Gachagua? Is it enough to cement that title in the Mount Kenya region?
It might be. It might be the beginning of something greater, because if I take you back to when the UDA regime gained prominence, is when they won the Juja by-election and Kiambaa by-election. When they did that against a sitting president, it proved to them that actually the idea whose time has come, and it cannot be stopped. And the new idea was now UDA. So if the same happens, and maybe it duplicates in Magarini, it triplicates in Malava, if this happens, then the populace will have been convinced that indeed it is a new dawn and we have a new government that is coming to be. And the government is doing everything possible to ensure at least they salvage their image. So they're going to use every machinery they can get to make sure they secure at least, if not all, most of these seats.
Right. You've mentioned, and of course, the paper PD here clearly states in this story that President Ruto has not set foot in Mbeere North to campaign for their candidate.
Yeah.
But who do you think is going to take credit in case UDA does win the by-election? You know, given what's been going on, Kindiki taking up all the...
This is the catch. It is what we call a catch-22 situation where damn if you do, damn if you don't. Right. I think for Kithure Kindiki, he's in a very bad place where if he wins the seat, it will not be his win. Let nobody lie to you that now the Mount Kenya populace will gather behind him and say that, no, this is our new kingpin. What is going to happen is that the president will take the win, but Kithure Kindiki will take the loss.
Right.
And we have seen the double talk with this regime and the president in particular. When campaigning back in before 2022, pre-2022, leading to 2022, every time he went on a campaign trail, he took all the benefits, all the wins, all the successes of the Jubilee regime. But all the failures, he said the government has failed. They sidelined me. I'm not part of the government. It is the government. Ask Baba, ask the handshake people. But anything, roads, we have built roads, we have built hospitals.
Right.
But anything on failure, it was now the government that threw him out that had failed. So I think I see the same double standards happening. If they lose, it will be that the DP has not clinched Mount Kenya. They gave him an opportunity to prove himself. He has failed. But if he wins that seat, it will be the president who will say, I didn't even have to go. I just sent my DP. Now imagine if I face them man-to-man. It is going to be his boast.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's look at another issue here on page 9 of the People Daily. It says, why dreaded 2027 election violence remains likely event. And it's talking about, independent security experts raising concerns that the 2027 general elections are likely to be infiltrated by criminal gangs, possibly sponsored by politicians to intimidate voters. It goes on to say that they termed the violence posed by criminals during the polls as a persisting threat, emphasizing that the current political atmosphere is a breeding environment for gangs for hire who can wreak havoc. What do you make of all this? Should Kenyans be worried?
I think history repeats itself. And if you have seen the precedents they have set with the Maandamano, they were infiltrated by goons. And allegedly, they were goons hired by government because it was believed that it was important for the government to tarnish the image of this revolution, to paint it as, a criminal entity. And that is why it was easy for the president to outrightly brand all the young men and women who are fighting for the liberation of their country as criminals and terrorists. So with that, as we look at that trend, where the government, or rather leaders, have had to use criminal gangs and elements to suppress opposition, to suppress, contrary opinion, dissenting opinion, I foresee the same being replicated come 2027. And it is something we need to be on the lookout. IEBC, I saw what they did in Kasipul, and that is good. I saw the candidates were both fined, a fine of 1 million Kenyan shillings. But, sometimes those people, maybe to them it's just how you and I can decide to take a cup of tea to them. And I think some of these things should lead to a clear disqualification. Because if you met violence against the same people you expect to vote for you, I don't see why you should even be a candidate in the first place. So we need to be more firm, more strict, more staunch in our ground as a country if we are indeed going to preserve this country from people who want to throw it to the dogs for their own personal interest.
Right, and clearly we still don't have an understanding of how much such behavior affects, our economy. And of course, GI Talk Executive Director Mark Shaw stated that Kenya, like its continental peers, like most African countries, is currently embroiled in a political economy where political decisions influence illicit economies and vice versa. Do we really understand the repercussions?
I think so far so good. Kenyans know the value of peace because we have faced some really tough times as Kenyans, and there was a time Kenya was the beacon of peace. You remember, it was a very peaceful country.
Right.
And it's sad that this thing is happening all across our neighborhood because after Kenya, the next beacon of peace was Tanzania. And you see what is happening. And all this is happening because we have some elements who think they deserve power more than others. They think this is, the animal kingdom where some animals are more equal than others. And that is a sad way to look at politics because I think why we have a democracy is that so that the minority can have their say and the majority can have their way. But if you suppress the so-called minority or majority and decide that there will only be one voice, so where is democracy in that? And what pains me as a citizen of the East African community is that the aggressors become the victims and the victims become the villains. And you have seen it in Tanzania. They are saying that these criminal elements, the young people, who are trying to disturb the peace of the country, have done it so bad that the international community now sees Tanzania in bad light, in that they have stopped giving the grants, the donations. So it is now being blamed upon the voters, the same voters who were denied their constitutional right. So they're not supposed to also enjoy their constitutional right to picket. They're not being branded as criminals for doing that. And who are now the custodians of this constitution? They're so-called, custodians of justice. The same people who are violating the constitution and the rights and liberties of the people. They seem, or they are supposed to represent.
All right, let's get into the Standard. The Standard got it right in terms of what is happening today. And the headline states, real state of nation. And, I mentioned earlier, Eston, what millions of Kenyans are grappling with in terms of the hard economic times. And it says, pledges and priorities. Kenyans have spoken. They do not need another ritual of promises. You mentioned that earlier. They need a state of the nation that starts where life is actually lived. In the security, the hunger, the shattered services, and the daily grind of 13 million households until leaders speak to that honest, painful baseline. Every grand vision remains just another speech drifting above a struggling nation. And going by past rhetoric, it could be another session of oratory full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, and it goes on to outline what matters to Kenyans in terms of public finances. People worry that fiscal consolidation means more taxes, higher service fees, and new levies. The central question is whether more financial pain is coming, more taxation. There's the issue of corruption. A credible state of the nation account must admit the scale of corruption and outline measurable reductions. Anti-corruption talk without candor lacks legitimacy. There is, of course, the issue of devolution, confusion over national versus county, roles overlapping continue to affect access to services. Effective devolution should ensure Kenyans get services without needing to navigate government bureaucracy. It, of course, goes on to explain about, the public. The focus should be on, jobs, incomes, wealth, opportunities, security. Kenyans want honesty about crime, terrorism, cybercrime, illicit trade, banditry, and all those things, households, you know, the true measures that the government is taking in terms of safeguarding those things, Eston. The other issue, governance and service delivery. And of course, you remember this government has been quite big in terms of incorporating, you know, digital platforms into service delivery, but that is not felt when it comes to Mwananchi. Eston, what do you make of all this?
I think this government suffers from three things. One is the escapist mentality, where they try to escape any problem that they create. Secondly, there is what we call the Messiah syndrome that they have, where they create a problem, then somehow come up with a solution, then expect us to praise them for solving a problem they created. So it is very sad for Kenyans that you come to Kenyans and you find a fully well-functioning system. For example, let's say let's say HELB,
yes,
the funding system, the university funding model. No one went to picket, not the students, not the lecturers, not the stakeholders went to picket and say, actually, HELB is not working. We need a change here. A number of men and women, the few representing the many, they sat down and decided to change the system against maybe the voice of the people. And that was seen by the kind of revolution that came out of it. So when you have a government that is not consulting the people, because this constitution they seem to always, refer to when it benefits them. It's the same constitution that stipulates that we need public participation. Before we pass any bill, before we move forward with any government agenda, we need public participation. And when the same government is not going back to the people to ask them what they want, and now it beats logic, who are they representing? Because anytime as a government, you need to know that you're not there to represent your interests. You're there to represent the interests of your people. The third problem that they're suffering from is what we call the blame game, where they blame everything on everyone.
Right.
Any failing system, they are blaming it on the previous government. But the few successes, actually the projects they are completing from the other government, the previous governments, they are now owning them as theirs. And the problem we have in Kenya is that with this blame game, they try to make it as though Kenyans are comparing this Kenya Kwanza government to the previous governments. No, we're not doing that. We're not here to compare the Kibaki regime with the Ruto regime, the Uhuru regime with the Ruto regime. What we're doing is we're comparing or holding him accountable to his promises. We're looking at the promises he gave to Kenyans versus what he has delivered. That is what we are gauging him with. It is not the success of the others. It is not the performance of the others. It is the promises he made or the government made against what it has delivered. That is what we are gauging the government against. Yeah. And
of course, you've mentioned a lot of this is surrounded by the issue of economy. I mean, this is a very, of course, this piece by Dennis Kabara talks about those things that I mentioned, security and all those things. But there is the issue of economy, because you remember that the regimes stated, its main focus was on stabilizing the economy. Yet what the people, across generations, want to understand is, where are we now as a country in terms of the economy? Where are we? Like you've said, Kenyans don't want more promises.
I think when the country keeps telling Kenyans that the economy is growing, we need to ask ourselves, where is this economy growing? Is it growing in the pockets of the few who employ the many, or the many who work for the few? Because it could be true. It could be that maybe the financial institutions and the wealthy in Kenya are enjoying this economy. Maybe because they control about 80% of the wealth in this country. Maybe if we look at that, maybe the economy is doing good. But what happens to the Kenyan, the ordinary Kenyan who voted in this government? What is happening in their pockets? If you see a government that has to report every now and then, just to say that we are heading the right way. If you have to report to the people to tell them we are headed in the right way, maybe we are not, because it's supposed to come from the people. There's no time you saw President Mwai Kibaki, you know, on a campaign trail, while still in government, serving as president, going to the people to tell them, actually, we are going to build the Thika superhighway. Actually, we are going to give you free primary education. We saw it happen. I remember there was an argument that he never even set foot in a county like Nyamira County while he was president. He never went there, but his work was felt there. He did not have to go there for his work to be felt. Because I think when that conversation came up, they were trying to say that the presidential candidate, I think Matiang'i, needs to go to let's say Nyamira and Kisii to consolidate his bloc. But we miss the point as Kenyans. The president does not have to come to Mount Kenya for us to feel that he is working. Right. He does not have to go to Nyanza for people of Nyanza to feel that the president is working. The president does not have to go to Mombasa so that the residents of Mombasa can see that his government is working. He only needs to ensure that the people of Mombasa, the people of Mount Kenya, the people of Kisumu get the services that they are supposed to get out of their government, a government that they pay taxes to. And also he needs to understand and maybe digest, decipher the words of Winston Churchill. You cannot tax a country into prosperity. It is like expecting yourself to grow rich by taking money from your right pocket, putting it to the left pocket. If anything, you should create a conducive environment for business so that people can invest from outside. But now we have seen a situation where investors are going to other countries because it is hard to do business in Kenya. The conditions are not right for business people. And I know you and I and all Kenyans, we know a business that has closed down. Right. Maybe not one, maybe more than two. We know businesses that have closed down. So what does that say about the economy? When we see stalls, empty stalls in Nairobi, stalls that were occupied, you cannot tell us that all these people have become digital. They're now operating from their homes, because I know that is how the government can defend themselves. But these people are closing up because it is hard to do business in Nairobi. Matter security. Your properties are not secure. If you decide to picket against what is not happening right in your country, they send goons to infiltrate the demonstrations. What happens to your property? They take you back to square one. What I said again, the Messiah syndrome. Maybe they come back with a few donations and tell you it is the people who are the problem. The people who are demonstrating against bad governance, against, you know, extrajudicial killings, against abductions, those are your enemies. Right. But these people who are suppressing you, oppressing you, those are your friends.
It's been a while since I had, President Ruto utter words to do with corruption. Yeah. Where are we as a nation when it comes to corruption and fighting corruption?
I think, I do not want to deduce or say that maybe they're eating, but there's a wise man who said that you cannot talk when you're eating, because sometimes you will see that issues to do with corruption are politicized. You're only corrupt if you're against the government, and you're guilty until proven a government supporter. The moment you support the government, it is like what we used to call the famous sanitization. You know how people used to go to Orange House and they said, nimeupe kama pamba, amesafishwa kama pamba. You go there corrupt, then you come out, as clean as cotton. Right. This is what is happening with the government. And I think it's hard for a government to criticize what it's driving upon. Because if you look at all the systems we're talking about, the e-citizens, the SHA we're talking about, the housing levy, all these things are marred with corruption. Right. So how do you criticize corruption when it seems to be the order of business in your government? It will be more like criticizing yourself, because you go to the to housing, there have been concerns about funds being diverted to private accounts. We have just read about some of the apartments that are being rented out as Airbnbs. Where is this money going to? Now we have we said we are going to create affordable housing for Kenyans. So when did this now say very Kenyans you are providing housing for tell you that actually I think we would rather you make it an Airbnb. I think we would rather visitors now from abroad came and rented these houses that we built with our own taxes, with the promise that we would own them.
The issue of President William Ruto giving and making promises to Kenyans has become quite rhetorical. So do you think, Aston, there will be a time where the president will get, I don't know if it's maybe going to be today, I mean, we can only wait, and you know, where he's able to read the room, the mood of Kenyans and say, all right, guys, enough is enough, things are not good, we need to go back to the drawing table?
I think Kenyans are missing the president as a leader. They're having him more as a politician. And sometimes it's good to balance the two. Maybe when we go back to, let's say, President Kibaki, maybe he was not very much a politician. He was more of a leader. He was more of an executor. He was there to execute. He was not concerned about populism. But this regime is a populist regime, and that is why they're quick to make sure they document any sort of, you know, anything that they're doing for Kenyans. Even if they hand 10 shillings to a Kenyan, they will have to put that on, you know, on photos to say that, you know, millions of Kenyans were helped by the president. Each was given 10 bob. And when you see a government that is driving on PR, it goes to tell you that, you know, a lot is going wrong. For a government to invest heavily on PR, that means nothing is being done. Because if work was being done by this government, we would not have the president going every now and then to rallies to defend his government. He would not need to do that. And if the president has to be the one to defend each and every activity of government, what does it say about the people he appointed to work for him? If the president has to go on record to defend Shah, what does that say about the minister, the CS for health?
Okay.
If he has to go, for instance, on record to defend the new funding model, what does that say about the Ministry of Education? If the president has to go and defend housing, you see, all these things, they fall under a particular ministry. And these particular ministers have failed in their own right. And that is why the president now has to be the man to make sure he goes and defends his government. Or maybe he is micromanaging everything. He wants everything to go by the book. And it is only his way. It's how we say it's either my way or the highway.
Or the highway. Okay.
Maybe that is that's what's happening in these ministries, and maybe that's why the president has to be the man every time to tell us Shah is working, even though he has not used it. Because if Shah was working, why would he go for checkup in Dubai? He just told us a few days ago during Baba's burial that he had gone to Dubai for checkup. And they met there, and he told Baba, actually, I come to Dubai for checkup. Okay. If the custodian of the Kenyan health system is not trusting the health systems he has put in place, what does that tell the Kenyan people? We're at a bad place. If the president, a mere checkup, if the president has to go for checkup in Dubai, what does that tell us about even our best institutions as a country?
Right. And the Standard has expounded this issue quite extensively on page 4 of the Standard still. It says, unmet pledges pile up as Ruto delivers third nation address, talking about some of the promises that he made. You know, as President William Ruto delivers his third State of the Nation address today, scrutiny is intensifying over the Kenya Kwanza manifesto he unveiled in 2022 and how many of its short and medium-term promises remain unfulfilled 3 years into his term. And of course, you remember the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. The administration's 2022-2027 blueprint was anchored on 3 pillars: short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. And many of the short-term pledges expected to be met by now, still not yet, lagging some of the issues, Aston. One of the most publicized was support for millions of Boda Boda riders. You remember that? Motorcycles were to be financed through the Hustler Fund, but the promised units have not materialized. The other issue, if you remember, is the issue of, of course, we mentioned that supply of new houses was expected to hit 250,000 units annually by now, and the share of affordable housing was to rise from 2% in 2022 to 50% next year. That still has not happened. And of course, a number of other issues. Domestically, civil servants were to gain clear career progression pathway. and Parliament was to enact a right to work law. I can go on, and of course, the Hustler Fund is mentioned a few times as having, been the roadmap in terms of financing some of these projects, and it's quite the health sector as it is right now, the education center right now, it's just quite unfulfilled promises. That's all I can say.
I know. If you look at the Hustler Fund, for instance, it failed so bad that they had to come up with a similar program called the Nyota program to hide the shame. So my question is, if your initial program, the very same program, failed, why are you maybe pushing a similar project to Kenyans? And why are we focusing on handouts? I think Kenyans do not need handouts. They need a government that is functioning, a government that is delivering services to them. Because if they create a conducive environment for you to do business, you don't need handouts. You will not need handouts from the government. If they don't borrow heavily from internally, you will not have problems accessing loans from your banking institutions. Now the government is borrowing heavily on these financial institutions internally, and now it has created a problem for the Kenyan people. They cannot access loans. So the government is now becoming the lender because they have borrowed all the money we could borrow from these banks. Now they want to lend it to us at a fee. So the government has become a private entity. And I remember there was a conversation about how the government of South Africa is listed on the New York Stock Exchange as a publicly traded company. But allegedly, the government of Kenya is also traded as a private entity. So who owns Kenya? We need to answer such questions as Kenyans. We need to know who owns Kenya, because if there are accounts that maybe are run by the Kenyan government, who are the beneficiaries? Is it the Kenyans? Because when we go to those terms you're talking about, the short terms, the long terms, the medium terms, I think the government has failed in terms of the short terms. The short-term goals, they are nowhere to be seen. The medium-term goals, the Kenya Kwanza regime's medium-term goals are nowhere to be seen. The long-term goals, if we have missed the short-term goals, we have missed the medium-term goals, we have missed the long-term goals. So the only goals that I think this government has succeeded in is the one-term goals, because they are doing everything possible to ensure that they don't get back in power, because they have failed on almost every promise. Because if you have fulfilled 14 out of almost 300 promises, what does that tell the people? If you have delivered 2,000 units against a promise of 250,000 units, what is it saying with regard to your performance as a government? So let them focus on these short-term goals they're talking about, or they used to talk about, the medium-term goals, before they come and tell us, actually, we have a vision. This is where we are going to be past or post 2027. Okay. Because that's what they thrive on. They promise us, they dangle a carrot to the Kenyans. This is what will happen past 2020. But you have failed. Let's talk about 2025. Okay. Let's talk about 2024, 2023. Don't take us back, all the way forward to 2027. That is where we're missing the point, because from the moment a government gets sworn in Kenya, we start campaigning immediately. Okay. That is where we miss the point.
Eston, the headline on the Daily Nation, briefly, we are out of time, but it's talking about promises versus reality, and it says that the scorecard, it's a mixed bag for President William Ruto as he makes his third State of the Nation address today. While his administration has scored some success in agriculture, cost of living, economy and infrastructure, he's failed, of course, the education sector, health sector. Do you think he's made strides in these mentioned sectors, agriculture, for instance?
I am yet to see maybe a sector that is praising this government. Most of the sectors are either closing down, complaining, or they're just surviving. They do not know what to expect. They're just surviving until 2027. And I think even the government does not know what is happening. They are focusing on maybe winning the next election. Okay. I think what we need to focus on as a country, go back to the people. I know it's sad that they have to come back to us to ask what we want, while they made promises to us saying they knew our problems. So go back to them. If you have forgotten what the promises were that you made, go back to them, ask them what they want, fulfill that. Don't make any more promises. We have already made enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eston, for being here with that. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. We are going to be taking a short break. When we return, I will be joined by former Agriculture Cabinet Minister Kipruto Arap Kirwa, Youth Leader Njeri Kahiga, as well as PNU CEO Chege Majus. But before that, of course, we are expecting later on in the day President William Ruto to make that State of the Nation address. Of course, expectations in terms of if he will make more promises. He is obligated to make this address as per Article 132 of the Constitution in terms of where we are as a country when it comes to national values, the progress the Kenya Kwanza administration has made thus far. But before we do that, let's take a look at a report prepared by our very own Brian Amoy pertaining to promises delivery reality ahead of that address later today.
The State of the Nation address by the President comes at a time that Kenyans in every corner of this country are heavily burdened by the weight of corruption, heavy taxation leading to mass erosion of people's purchasing power, unfulfilled promises, and shattered dreams.
From the farms of the highlands to Nairobi's glass towers, Kenya's story in 2025 is one of two simultaneous realities. A renewed economic momentum on paper and painful pressures on ordinary households in practice.
Kenya saa hii ile kitu tuna produce ni kama siasa peke yake.
Mafuta ikikuwa chini hata si vitu tutapata na bei rahisi.
Kenya's economy is growing again in 2025. Official data shows a rebound with year-on-year GDP growth hitting around 5% in the second quarter, driven by agriculture, transport and finance.
We have a serious economic crisis. The public debt is out of proportion.
A positive direction after a slow 2024, but the rebound masks deeper strains.
Wanasemanga fertilizer iko chini, lakini ukienda pale kwa mkulima, bado si mambo si vile wanasema.
The World Bank and IMF set different tones for the year 2025. While international institutions forecast modest growth for Kenya in 2025, they warned that the high public debt, expensive domestic borrowing and tight credit are squeezing the private sector and slowing job creation.
Watu tunateseka. Unapata shilingi 200 hata kwenda nyumbani inakuwa ni shida sana kugawa hizo pesa.
Kazi bado unapata, ajira ni ile, labda hujaongezewa mshahara.
Na uangalie stima, na uangalie rent, hizo vitu zote ukiangalia watoto kusoma, watoto wengi wako kwa manyumba kwa ajili ya sababu hawana pesa, hawana school fees.
That combination, which is debt service, high lending rates and falling business credit, is a choke point for manufacturing and small businesses.
There is no money in circulation. Pending bills have not been paid. The cost of living is beyond the reach of the ordinary Kenyan, and everybody is crying.
For many households, the economy of 2025 feels less like recovery and more like adjustment.
Like before ukija na kama 3,000 unapata unaenda na vitu vya maana at least nyumbani.
Kwanza kwa vitu hapa kwa soko sasa zishikiki. Leo unaweza kuja unapata kabeji labda ni 25, kesho unakuja na hiyo 25 unaambia uongo kijana, vitu zilipanda.
Inflation and basic commodity prices have eased from their worst peaks, but many Kenyans still cite food prices, transport costs and high borrowing costs as persistent pains.
Bei ya mboga iko bei ghali sana. Gunia saa hii inauzwa 4,000, robo tunauziwa 1,200. Hatupati kitu, unauza unapata hasara.
Leo unaweza kuwa umekuja umejipanga na shilingi 100, unasema hii 100 yangu itanitosha hizi vitu kadhaa. Kesho ikifika unapata ile 100 hata inunui tena kitu.
For example like breakfast, ukiongeza maziwa, sukari, unaweza tumia kama 300 kwa saa. Lunch time pia utumie the same 300, jioni labda watu wote wamefika nyumbani, kuna wenye hawako mchana, unaweza tumia around 500, ambapo saa hii using more than 1,000 for meals in a day, it's a bit hectic.
public spending choices, especially on infrastructure and salary commitments, are shaping both growth prospects and public frustration.
GDP, and I'm referring to whatever was projected. GDP growth for 2024 was 4.7%. Inflation was 4.1%. But if you look at the aggregate GDP figures that were tabled, it is 17.2 vis-a-vis 19 point something. If you do that, nominal GDP growth, therefore, is around 10%. If nominal GDP growth is 10%, where are we getting this? Where are we getting the GDP that you are projecting, or where are we getting the percentage of real GDP? Because even if you net off inflation out of the nominal GDP, we are still not, the figures are not aligning. So, do we inflate the denominator in terms of GDP to align the deficit, or are these figures correct? And if it's correct, which of these three figures are actually correct?
2025 is a year shaped by political fault lines that are often as regional as they are ideological.
Ati wanasema ati nyinyi ni watu ya shilingi hamsini. Kwani nyinyi ni watu mmenuliwa na pesa kidogo? Washindwe wasishindwe.
The fallout from the 2024's high-profile impeachment of a deputy president continues to recalibrate alliances and ambitions across the country.
When the history of this community is written, the members of parliament from this community will have a whole chapter of the most foolish leaders ever elected in the Mount Kenya region.
At the center is a governing coalition under pressure, managing economic expectations while keeping a fractious party and regional power brokers aligned.
Watu ya Malaba si wajinga, wanajua ndakwa si ndakwa. Hebu nione mkono ya ndakwa hapa, niangalie kwa mkono.
The result is a frenetic deal-making, frequent headline disputes and the occasional public rupture, all of which make policy continuity harder and politics more unpredictable.
Utajiuzuru kwa kusema ukweli ama kwa nini? Lazima mtu aseme, uzungumze ukweli wako pale. Na kama kuna makosa yoyote, niko tayari kusimamia na kuyatetea vilivyo.
Governance challenges extend beyond the political theater. The integrity of institutions, judiciary, electoral management, anti-corruption agencies has been repeatedly tested this year by accusations of politicized investigations, delayed appointments, and questions over the independence of oversight bodies.
One of the institutions that has really suffered the overreach of the executive is actually the institution from where the president will be making the address tomorrow. The president has clearly captured parliament.
Yes. Mukisema ya kwamba nataka kutoa Chief Justice Martha Koome, ile mpango yote mko naye na ielewa. Mnataka kutoa Supreme Court and Martha Koome because wewe na Ruto and your people want to rig elections.
We are doing the tabulation and looking at the evidence that we have recovered so far.
This intimidation is pure political intimidation. Hakuna kitu kingine. Purely political intimidation. There is no reason why more than 50 police officers can wake up to my office.
These battles shape public perception in the system.
As we plan for the by-elections and the next coming general elections, that we work together collectively because we have shared responsibility.
You are taking office at a time when our nation is undergoing a period of great reckoning.
We have summoned those especially in Bere, stating that they are banning some people from stepping there to campaign.
And it is the high time that those who have committed those crimes, and they are not already with us, they come forward to the police.
Data has also revealed that there has been marginalization, with some communities not getting positions in government.
The main ethnic groups control the main leadership of those institutions. Therefore, they control who gets hired in those institutions. There's 290 state corporations. There is 146,000 positions. But we have 0 Dorobo, 0 Dasanach, 0 Malakote, 0 Wayu, Wata, Gosho, Council, and Makonde, some of them you didn't even know they are ethnic groups in our country.
A defining element of 2025 is civic unrest. Demonstrations, many sparked by lingering anger over taxes, living costs, allegations of police brutality and perceived government impunity.
Mambo ambayo yanahusu utekaji nyara wa watu katika taifa letu la Kenya na wengine kuteswa na wengine pia kupoteza maisha yao imekuwa janga kubwa, na nimeonelea kwamba hilo jambo ni lazima lizungumziwe katika baraza la mawaziri.
These demonstrations erupted in mid-year and left a heavy toll on the country. Human rights groups and local monitors documented deaths, injuries and mass arrests during several major demonstrations in the country.
We condemn the use of excessive force by some members of the security services. All actors, whether state or non-state, must uphold the right to life, dignity, and peaceful assembly. Always.
Askari wasipige wananchi risasi kuwaua. Lakini muhalifu, mtu ambaye amechukua kazi kwenda kuvunja biashara ya mtu mwingine, ashughulikiwe, aende hospitali, akienda kotini.
And we are warning the police officers. The law will catch up with you. Get the message. Police officers who are abducting us and terrorizing us, the law will catch up with you. Get the message. And if the law do not catch up with you, the people will catch up with you.
Anatoa msamaha kwa Gen Z in a very casual manner. You know, we are talking about loss of life. How do you issue an apology about the loss of life in such a casual manner?
Tuko wengi kuliko serikali, tuko wengi kuliko hata matajiri wale wamehijack economy yetu. Na ndio maana tunapigana hapa kwa sababu economy imecrumble. Nothing is working in this country. Institutions of this country are not working. Hata judiciary haiwork. Kwa Kenya united shall never be defeated.
Reports from independent bodies describe excessive force at times, arrest of protest leaders and restrictions on peaceful assemblies and expression.
If it's true that they don't know what's going on, should resign. If they know what's going on and are doing nothing, they should resign. Because they are incapable to perform the duties for which the Kenyans have appointed them and keep them in office.
No, enough is enough. Haiwezi kuendelea tena.
Civil societies have responded with calls for accountability.
No grievance, however genuine, should ever result in the loss of life or the destruction of livelihoods that citizens have worked so hard to build.
Watajua hawajui. Wajaribu.
The government has defended security operations as necessary to protect public order.
Anaenda kuvamia police station. That is a declaration of war in the Republic of Kenya. It is not acceptable.
Unagitated, the standoff has left wounds that go beyond the streets, affecting trust between the state and the youth who feel most aggrieved.
I'm not seeing them ceasing. We have seen one as recently as 24 hours ago. They shouldn't be happening in the first place. This is a free country. We have the law. Tuko na katiba. We don't understand why people are being surveilled. And it also questions where you're walking around with your devices. Little do we know these are monitoring devices. So are we really safe in our own country?
Beyond the protests, social policy remains a flashpoint. Health system capacity, education reforms and the rollout of the social health insurance continue to generate debate, especially over costs, quality and perceived equity of access.
In the room when it comes to discussion of SHA is claims management and the whole reimbursement process, the rejection of claims, the late disbursements. The figures that the CEO shared with me, cumulative for all counties, is in the region of 32 billion shillings for public hospitals.
We are now dependent solely on one person to make a decision, or maybe it's a team of people who make a decision.
The promise made by none other than the head of state himself, and in fact I remember the words that he used, that Harambes for raising hospital bills would be a thing of the past because the medical scheme that we are going to put in is going to cover health care for all. And there was no rider At that particular moment in time, nobody told us, Honorable Speaker, that it would be for 10% or a portion. That is the justification, Honorable Speaker, why my contribution moved from less than 1,000 to 33,000. And he was telling us that those of us who are able to pay more should do so, so that Harambes are a thing of the past. Are Kenyans still holding Harambes to fund Medicare? Yes, they are. Therefore, SHA is not working.
In 2025, Nairobi has pursued an active and sometimes assertive foreign policy, deepening ties across Asia, Europe and the Maghreb, while balancing long-standing relations with Western partners. Kenya's outreach to alternative partners and the expansion of trade and diplomatic posts are designed to boost trade, investment and strategic depth.
Hizi vitunguu zinatokanga nje, kama hizi miji wapata huku kwetu hakuna, zinatoka huko TZ. Viazi via zinatokana huko. Most of vitu mingi huku zinatoka nje.
Pineapple ya Kenya kadogo hivi unanunua kitu 120 to 150. Pineapple ya Uganda kubwa imetoka Uganda kama hii, like this one. This one imetoka all the way from Uganda. Inafika hapa na night seedings. Naona ni kubwa. So what are you prefer kununua gani?
But every tilt carries political and economic consequences at home, from trade deals to aid conditionality and geopolitical balancing.
Tangu mkoloni aende, mbeberu awache nchi kwa mikono ya Mwafrika. Hii ndio mara ya kwanza Kenya imekosa heshima katika mataifa ya kigeni. Mambo ya foreign affairs is very sensitive. Kama hiyo DRC Congo ilikuwa makosa sana rais wetu kuingilia. Hiyo mambo ya Sudan kuleta rebels hapa kutengeneza serikali hapa KICC, hiyo ni makosa. Kwa sababu hiyo ni kutuletea vita kati ya Kenya na Sudan.
Beyond the graphs and geopolitics, ordinary Kenyans define the state of the nation by daily experiences. Can I get to work? Is school and health affordable? Is my child safe? Will I be treated fairly by police and public servants? Those answers remain mixed in the year 2025 as the country takes stock on the state of the nation.
We don't have the capacity as at now to finance free primary, free secondary, because we have other competing needs for funds. Get those children who have financial challenges to be educated or supported by government, and those who can afford pay their own fees.
Na mimi nataka niwahakikishie wa Kenya ya kwamba free primary education katika primary na secondary ni haki ya kikatiba ya wananchi wa taifa letu la Kenya.
We have to be realistic and ask ourselves, do we continue living that lie or we do it differently?
Tumehakikisha ya kwamba in the last 2 years tumefanya mambo kadhaa to make sure that education is truly universal and truly accessible.
We cannot, let us not cheat ourselves as a country that we can finance fully.
Because the commitment we have is that education is the greatest empowerment that any society, any country can give to its young people.
We don't have that economic power.
And that is why education must be affordable, must be accessible, must be of good quality, and must be relevant.
So as we speak, I think we are still short of the promise that was given to the people of Kenya by this administration.
Junior high teachers lamenting on what they term as failed promises and demanding better remuneration. At the same time, the head of state confident that he has a plan to ensure that there are enough teachers.
Pronunciation and the remarks that was being made by our able president. I was worried that the same president who prioritizes education is the same president who is coming up to punch in turns.
Lecturers recently had downed their tools, affecting higher learning for the better part of that term.
We are not asking to be called to State House to go at the be dished out money. We are asking to be paid what is due to us.
They are not civil enough to honor a very simple agreement with the university workers, which amounts to about 2.73 billion.
Kenya in 2025 is a nation torn between realities. A president confident that he has a solid 8 out of 10 and that the future continues to be promising.
There is no reason why we cannot catch up with Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, there is no reason we can catch up with them if we just make the right decisions. And I'm going to go out of my way to make sure we make those decisions.
A public dejected and already giving up on the state. That is the real state of the nation.
Tumepakia tu kufaa longi, lakini ukiangalia hata ukiangusha mwanaume saa hii hapa chini ni longi tu, pesa hakuna ndani. Tumepakia tu suruali tu kuonekana wewe ni mwanaume, lakini hakuna kitu.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I have done 8.
Brian Amoai, K24.
Quite a piece there by our very own Brian Amoai. Asante sana, Brian, for that report. And indeed, we continue with the conversation right here on Kameme TV as well as on K24 ahead of President William Ruto's State of the Nation address later on in Parliament buildings. Kenyans heavy with expectations in terms of the state of economy, where we are as a country. Millions of Kenyans, remember, continue to grapple with high cost of living, high taxation, and various concerns. We will continue with this conversation right here. Continue speaking to us on our various social media handles on Facebook, Kameme TV Kenya, as well as K24 TV on X, at Kameme TV Kenya, as well as at K24 TV. It will be sampling your views as we continue with the program this morning. And my next set of guests have arrived. We have former Cabinet Minister Kipruto Arap Kirwa. Thank you so much for being here. We also have Youth Leader Njeri Kahiga. Thank you so much for being here. And we also have PNU CEO Chege Majus. Thank you so much, lady and gentlemen, for being here with us tonight. Today, this morning, I think I'm used to evenings during the show. Let's start with you, Waziri. You know, during last year's State of the Nation address by President William Ruto, it was heavily centered on, economic recovery, food security, health, housing, jobs, and all those things. Quite a number of promises he made there last year. What are your expectations from the president today?
Thank you for having me this morning, and thank you for the opportunity to share with Kenyans our thoughts, our aspirations, and at times our frustrations.
Right.
What I know the president is good at is having his own set of statistics which are not reflected by other institutions, local or international. And this is something that we would want to advise him, that makes him good for him to respond to the issues as they are. The reality today is that food security is not as good as we would have expected, despite the fact that they have been talking of fertilizer that they gave at reduced prices, but at times they were not available. The second issue is that, which has really been a bit of concern to me. You cannot use statistics that you created as a matter of failing to curb the shilling from falling to 165 to $1. When he took over, President Uhuru left the shilling at 120. Now he has brought it back to 129, which we do appreciate. But when he uses the parameter that he has brought it down from 165, to say the least, that is the president lying in clear power to the public. The second issue is that there are certain realities that we know he cannot surmount. The issue of the debt, the issue of defaulting, that he says we're about to default.
Right.
And yet he himself had said that he was not going to do any borrowing. And yet he has done borrowing to the extent that now we are dealing with about 12 trillion. Almost for every 100 shillings that we create, it is clear 90 shillings is going back to take care of the debt, including the arrears and the interest and certain penalties that we suffer. So I do expect, again, he's going to lie to the public, and in his lying, he's going to give us statistics that are not in tandem with the reality in Kenya today.
Right. Njeri, what would you give President Ruto from last year's address up until now? In that speech, he did tell Kenyans to be, patient. Transformation takes time. Should we expect that, or do you think he's going to tone down on the promises that he's used to making that's almost become very rhetorical?
Thank you so much for having us this morning. We as young people and as this generation of Gen Z, we appreciate the chance and opportunity to listen to our views, something that the government of Kenya is unable to do every other day. First of all, when we talk about transformation takes time, I've never understood the logic that government uses when they tell us that transformation takes time, yet absorption of our taxpayers' money does not take time. It happens every other day. You cannot be absorbing our money, but you want us to take time and wait for transformation. It should concurrently be seen. As you consume our money, as you spend our money, as you budget on our money, we should be seeing results. Some results might take time because a road won't be done from morning to evening, but some basic things like a running economy, you feel them every other day. When you go to the supermarket, when you go to the healthcare, when you go to school, you are supposed to feel an economy that is doing well. And again, for him to spend time to sit down and prepare for an address, I think he should just have sent his people to come tell us whatever he promised last year, he has done nothing at all, and he's just coming to top up other lies, because I've never understood the budget we are going to spend today, the motorcade, you're going to see the budget we're going to spend for him to move from State House to go to Parliament to engage us. The people who are going to be moving from their workstation to Parliament, the members of cabinet who will accompany him will not be in their offices. Every other thing is going to stop for a minute for him to address the nation. The resources we're going to use today, we would have done something better for it. Then again, why are we listening to a man who has cost us over $500 million in terms of by-elections? What more can he tell us about our economy when he's one of the people who have majorly made us go back into our coffers and empty them more than they say they found them? And I have to be very honest, we as the young people are really wondering what the president is going to tell us, because when he came last year, he promised us a lot of jobs. But what he didn't tell us is that we are going to move from exporting coffee, tea, and everything else to exporting labor. He didn't tell us that his plan was to ensure that everybody else get employed abroad, but he's the only one who is around and his team to be working in Kenya comfortably and with big allowances and a lot of expenditure. One thing as young people we are wondering is, why would you come to talk to us when for the last 1 year we've been talking to you and you've been responding to us with so much agitation, with so much aggressiveness that was unnecessary? Why are you coming to talk to Kenyans who are still mourning? You are coming to talk to Kenyans who their parents, some of our parents have not seen their kids for maybe 1 year plus. You are talking to Kenyans who, until today, cannot bury their loved ones because of hefty bills, and those people were murdered and brutally killed during demonstrations. So I feel the president is quite hypocritical, and especially him taking time to address the nation when we have a by-election. I think he should only come to tell us in that address that the over $500 million we are spending courtesy of him, he's going to give it back from his salary, because there is nothing much more that we as Kenyans expect. Then again, Kenyans have always told him, the promises you made in your first year address, your second year address, you want to come again, give us a different set of lies in your third year. Why don't you just do what you told us when you were doing campaigns and maybe in your first year address? Can you first tick some few boxes, then we can say we are allowed to come give us more promises.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chege Majus, there's a time, if you remember, whereby the State of Nation address was quite a big deal, and Kenyans heavily anticipated for it, you know. They were hopeful. And of course, the president is obligated, as per the Constitution, to make that address. It's a yearly ritual. Do you think it's necessary? Do you agree with Njeri? He should have just sent some of these people, or sent out, you know, a press release or some sort of statement?
What you have said that it's a constitutional mandate. As a president, he has the mandate to address the nation each year on issues that are affecting Kenyans. I was not even able to say hi to people of Nakuru because your question was pushing me to answer it. But I want to say hi to all people, to all Kenyans, and especially where I come from, people of Nakuru County, and all the members of my party, Party of National Unity. I want to say that what is bedeviling this regime is that the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the foundation of this regime, how they came into power, the foundation was wrong. They started on the wrong footing, on the wrong note. We had a president who promised so much that in an overnight, things are going to change. That the poor, the downtrodden, were going to be taken from down there, and they were automatically going to go up there in his 1 or 2 years of his government. But the reality started hitting Kenyans when he appointed his first cabinet. You realize that this regime, the one-term regime, we have had so many cabinet secretaries. Hata wenye wako, they don't know if they will finish this year. Because each day, there are rumors there will be a cabinet reshuffle. Because there was no agenda from the word go. The word go, the hustlers to dynasties, it was meant to hoodwink Kenyans so that they can be able to root. Because they thought these hustlers were not clever enough to realize their tricks. That's why you realize the first cabinet was made up of crooks and criminals. Some of them right now, last weekend, they have even cases of battery, whatever they were, maybe in Kilifi. A former cabinet secretary of this regime slapped just a normal mwananchi for asking a question. That was the cabinet that Ruto started with. If you look at what the manifesto and the agendas they started with, like Hustler Fund, why is it now? Hustler Fund was a pyramid to siphon Kenyans' money. The last I heard of Hustler Fund is that over 30 billion got lost there, and nobody talks about it. Are we together? Because it was meant like, can we come with so pyramid schemes that we can be able to siphon Kenyans' money without them realizing? But Kenyans were clever enough. They were telling Ruto, we remember when you were on the top of those vehicles, you told us you are going to do ABCD. We had the Anglican Archbishop, Ole Sapit. Immediately after 1 year, when watu walianza kuona the signals, there's something wrong with this regime, they came out with his council of bishops. They told the president, admit you had overpromised. Admit you cannot be able to run a nation. Because everything that they started was collapsing in their own eyes. Tell me one agenda of President William Samoei Ruto that has seen the light of the day. From the education reforms, to the health reforms, to everything. He's talking about education should be free. As in university, I'm doing law at the University of Nairobi. We are even less than a week in the school. The entire semester has gone without us having any meaningful learning in the university. There is this bishop from Kisumu the other day. He asked a fundamental question. He asked, what is this nonsense about empowerment? Who are you empowering? If the kids are at home, if there are no capitation at schools, the lecturers, there is no learning in the universities. People who have worked legally, I'm talking the word legally, because there are people, contractors, who have worked for this regime. And they are lining up daily in various ministries and various corporations, asking for their payments. But they cannot be paid because there is no money. But there is money for the soprano, as the bishop was calling that guy. The soprano to walk around with choppers, dishing out money that you are empowering. What are you empowering? How can you come and empower my mother while I'm not even attending the education that he wants so much for me to attend so that I can be somebody in this life? And then you are giving him Maragwe, you are giving him what, and you are calling it empowerment. It was a grand scheme. This is not even a one-tap. Kenya should change the word. It was a grand scheme to freeze Kenyans, to plunder this country. But I thank God, most of the Kenyans, most of the clergies, even the churches that were praying that one day Ruto can become the president, they have opened their eyes and they are telling him to his face that history will be written, but it will be written. There came a person who confused Kenyans, and they pulled up a grand scheme that literally plundered this country, and this country went on its knees. Yes.
Waziri, you have served the country in various, positions, and of course as agriculture minister during President Kibaki's tenure. What is the biggest gap in this regime in terms of governance? You know, Majus has just mentioned the issue of how this government started out. Where do you think the rain started beating us?
Well, one thing that I'm very clear about the current president, William Ruto, is that he does not believe in institutions. This therefore means that he believes in his own ingenious ways of changing names of institutions for the purpose of ensuring that it has moved from NHIF to SHA or SHISHA, whatever is the case. But that is all meant to create an opportunity for a loophole such that the resources disappearing are not traced by any institutional capacity or memory. That is something, that's why at the beginning of time, he was able to decimate parliament by ensuring that members of the opposition or the minority were defecting from their positions to move to government coalition, that's Kenya Kwanza, so as to destroy the institution of parliament. He went to the judiciary and he was able to visit judiciary with a number of threats, unlike the situation that was there before. The third issue was almost to scare every public servant by telling them that I know more than your departments or the ministries you run, because he himself is one-man show, he's a micromanager, he believes in himself even where he's failing. Compared to the Kibaki regime, Kibaki allowed people to work. When he gave you a job, you knew you had a job, and it was up to you to do well in that job, and if you don't do well, you would be able to allow you to be left to the institutions that are able to rein in bad manners. But the current regime, it is the president running each and every department of government, and that does not allow innovation, it does not allow capacity to think, or even to organize teams and groups so as to deliver as one united front. This is the difference between this regime and other regimes of people who believe that governance is supposed to be an institution that runs the country. The second issue, I do not know whether the president knows that he's going against the constitution each and every other day. And some of the decisions that he has made are criminal. And you know, criminal decisions do not have any time limit. Our good friend Shege knows that any criminal activity does not have time limit. And some of the decisions he's been making, using the executive order, will also be reversed when he's out of the office. Because we strongly believe public resources must be respected and public land must also be respected. Such that when you talk about this affordable housing, housing for who? Housing for what? How is it going to be affordable when each and every unit that is produced is retailing slightly above the normal market prevailing conditions? If it's a unit of 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, it's retailing between 4.5 million up to 6 million. So how affordable is it? It is just a scam to ensure that the suppliers of cement, suppliers of all building materials have a ready market for that particular product. You see, instead of building an industry which would assist the people of Kenya to have somewhere to work and produce, you are building houses. You can be in the best house in this town, but if there is no industry that you are engaged in and you are not productive, that house, you are not going to eat part of the furniture in the house. This therefore means that the president does not believe in running an institution. I don't know, when he talks about PhD, many people have gone to school. And no president, since independence, has talked about his education. Whether it is President Moi, who had modest education, he was able to perform. Whether it is Kenyatta, whether it's Kibaki, who I strongly believe was somebody who had gone to school very well, he never talked about it. Whether it's President Uhuru, he never talked about it. But he reminds us that he has gone to school and therefore is the best of the lot.
Okay, thank you, Waziri. Indeed, we are going to continue with this conversation. We're going to be taking a short break. We will continue to monitor and, of course, get reactions from various regions and, of course, at Parliament from various members of Parliament ahead of the State of the Nation address by President William Ruto later today. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
The Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority na Kameme FM nĩ maragwĩtĩra roadshow matũũra-inĩ matiganĩte. Nĩ ũkeyumĩria ũmenye maingĩ megiĩ ũrĩa ũngĩkinyĩra indo ciaku iria ciũrĩte. Thursday tarĩki 20 November, mũgithi ũkambĩrĩria matũũra ma Kirigiti, Thĩndĩgua, Rwaka, Ndenderu, Wangigĩ, Zambezi, Gĩtarũ, Kinoo, Ũthĩĩru, Lower Kabete na Banana. Nĩ ũgacanjamũrwo nĩ Syke Simba Jr. na MC Casper. The Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority UFAA. Receive, safeguard, reunite. Hihi tũkorwo ũhũthagĩra thimũ yaku o kũhũra, gũtũma SMS kana gũtũmĩra WhatsApp tu. Reke tũgũcanũre ũrĩa ũngĩhota kwĩgĩra iheo nayo. Jishikie Rewards. Ũrabatara o download app ya Stahili, weke survey o nini, ũheo data. Any more internet, more life. Gũtirĩ gweterera na ndũrarĩhio onakĩ. Nĩ tũnyitanĩire na endia indo mwanya mwanya matuka-inĩ na athondeki indo gũtigĩrĩra ũũ atĩ wagũra kĩndũ ũkaheo rewards. Download Stahili app ũmũthĩ, wĩkĩre special code Kameme TV na hau ũtugwo na iheo ta cashback coupons. It's that simple. Zawadika pap na Stahili.
Kameme TV.
Our future light on the African sky. In all the kingdoms fall, I will rise on the African sky. Great is Nairobi, this is the by people on all the K24 presenting the Good Vibes Festival live in Nairobi, Kenya at the Jamhuri Park.